In this week's tutorial, we're going to be looking at the quick selection tool, and we're going to show you how you can train the quick selection tool to be able to go through and select an object. For instance, we've got this bird here on the screen, and if I remove the background here, I'll show you how to make a pretty precise selection by using the quick selection tool. But first, we're going to show you how to train the quick selection tool in order to get this type of an extraction. So I'm going to go ahead and turn my background layer on. I'm going to bring my layers palette into view here. This was the extracted layer here, and we'll just go ahead and throw that away. We're going to start this process all again. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually move the layers palette out of the way, and let's come over here to our tools palette and let's grab the quick selection tool. Now underneath the quick selection tool, you'll also find the magic wand tool, which is what we don't want to use. We're going to be using the quick selection tool here. You can get there by hitting the W key on your keyboard, and if you happen to get the magic wand tool, just hold the shift key down and hit the W key one more time, and that will give you your quick selection tool. So the first thing I'm going to do once I've selected the quick selection tool is I'm going to come over here, and in one of these areas in the bird, I'm going to pick an area that's got some brown and some white in it, and I'm going to enlarge the brush just slightly. I'm going to make it a little bit larger by hitting the right bracket key, and I'm just going to click one time, and that's going to make a selection here on the bird. Obviously, if the selection goes outside of the bird, you'll want to do a Command D or Control D on the PC to deselect that selection and make sure that at least your selection is following within the subject that you want to extract. Then I'm going to shrink the quick selection tool down just a little bit by hitting the left bracket key. And what I want to do is I want to start training the quick selection brush on what areas I don't want selected. And in order to do that, I'm going to hold down the Option key on the Mac or Alt key on the PC. And you'll notice once I hit the Option or Alt key, we're going to see the plus symbol in the middle of the quick selection tool turn to a minus symbol. And all I want to do is click and drag along the areas of the bird that I do not want selected. And you'll notice some of the sand is pretty close to some of the feathers that are going on here with the bird. So this is a very important step to just kind of follow this around. Now I want to make even a tighter selection in here in between these feathered areas. So I'm going to shrink the brush once again by clicking on the left bracket key. Once again, I'm going to hold down the Alt or Option key, and I'm just going to kind of drag up into these areas. Obviously, I don't want to touch any of the areas where the feathers are, but I want all of the sand that is going to be blending around the image. And I'm just going to follow this all the way around. And I'm going to follow it around the rock because I want the rock to be part of the extraction, which is going to be quite interesting because obviously the rock blends in with some of these grains of sand here. So we'll see how well we do as we come around and just deselect these areas. Now, once I get to the feet here, I'm just going to come on into the inside and follow that around as well because I don't want any of this area selected. I want this to be transparent once we've completed all of our extraction. And I'm just going to follow this up all along the way and just continue to train the quick selection brush or quick selection tool the areas that I don't want. Okay, now I've made my selections of what I don't want, so I'm going to release the Alt or Option key. I'm going to make the brush a little bit bigger, but not too much bigger. A lot of times I like to just click and not necessarily paint with it. And as you can see, when we get out to some of these edges here, I'm going to shrink that brush down just a little bit and click on it, and I'm starting to get a pretty good selection. Now, one way that you can improve some of the selections that this tool is making is to come up here to the Auto Enhance and click and check that on. Your computer might slow down just a little bit as it's making selections, but not to worry. You're probably going to get a much smoother, better defined selection if you do click on that. And I'm just clicking and making very short dragging motions here in the specific colors that I'm trying to keep. And I'll just come down here and you can see that this is doing a really good job of separating the bird from the sand, even though some of the tonal qualities of the bird mimic that of the sand. So we will continue on and make our selections. I'm going to click here in some of the blue-footed areas. Again, I'm just clicking. I'm not necessarily dragging. I'm allowing the quick selection tool to do its job. Sometimes you do have to slightly drag it through, but a lot of times I like making very short, small, easy strokes. And I want to make sure that I get all these feet in here and all of this done correctly. And then I'm just going to start coming through on this rock. We want to make sure that the rock gets selected, but not the sand around it. And we'll go ahead and let the computer redraw just a little bit here, but it's doing a great job, as you'll notice, around the sand. There's a few areas that we still have to work on. I've got to get that area there. I have an area right here where it picked a little bit of the sand up, and so how I'm going to eliminate that is I'm going to hold the Option or Alt key down, and I'm just going to drag over that to deselect that area. And then the area that it missed, I'm going to go ahead and pick that up here real quick. And I see some of the feathers along the back here. Let's go ahead and zoom in for a moment. Now I'm using Photoshop CS4, so all I need to do is hold the Z key down and it's going to zoom right in there. And now you can see I still have my quick selection tool selected. And I'm just going to come on through and brush into some of these areas where it didn't quite pick up everything that I wanted on the bird's back here. So we'll just come and make just a few little modest minor adjustments here. And overall, we've got a pretty good selection going. We could go into and refine the selection, but we're not going to talk about that in today's tutorial. We're really just showing you how to train the quick selection tool in order to give the results that you want. I'm going to zoom out here for a moment. And now I think I've got a pretty good selection going. I've got one other little area down here I want to take care of. And I'll just grab right there, and that's going to quickly come in and finish our selection. And it's done a pretty doggone good job, and it hadn't taken us all that much time to do. Now, once I have my selection, I want to put this up on a layer all by itself. I'll bring the layers palette back into view here, and I'm going to hold down the Command J key just to give me a cut and paste. And so that's going to put this up. That'll be a Control J on the PC. And now you can see that I've got a really good extraction going on right there from my original image. And of course, I could always then bring this image into another image. And I'm going to do that here. I'm going to open up this image. I've already dropped the bird into this image. You can see that. I'm going to turn that off. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to place our extraction right into another image here. So the first thing that I'll do is I'm going to get out of full screen mode. I'm going to hit the F key twice, and that'll bring me back to my tabbed version. Now, if you're not using Photoshop CS4, you won't have a tabbed version. You'll just see the images floating in the various windows. And what I want to do is I want to drag the bird onto this image, just like I've done here, and I'm going to show you how I did that. So I'm going to click here, and I'm going to click and make sure that I'm on this layer, and I'm going to make sure that I've got the Move tool. Now, this only works in Photoshop CS4. If you happen to be working on one of the older versions of Photoshop, you'll just want to actually drag the layer from one image to another. But in Photoshop CS4, what you're going to do is you're going to click on the image, and you're going to drag it up and hover it over the other image until that image appears, and then you're going to drop it right on there. And then of course you've still got the Move tool, and you can reposition it and put it however you like. So that is one way for you to get that image over there to another image. But as you can see, you can train the quick selection tool to make better extractions from your images just by going through the procedures that we talked about in this week's tutorial. Well, that concludes our tutorial for today. Thanks for joining us. This is Michael Rather from the Digital Photography Connection.